Good morning, Lloyd. How are you today?
Good morning. Fine, thank you.
Good. Well, thank you for kicking off 2025. I've been fortunate enough to be working with Enviro-Stewards now for over a year, which is hard to believe. But, one of those questions that never really came up in kind of the beginning of it all is how you got where you are and how you came to Enviro-Stewards. So I'm wondering if we can start a little bit with your background today, and if you can tell me a little bit about what made you pursue a career in engineering to begin with.
Sure, yeah. Well, my dad was an engineer, so sort of got an insight into what he did. And of course, him being an engineer wanted to encourage his kids to follow his path. And as I went through school and grew up, I really enjoyed the outdoors and thought it'd be great if I could get a career that had something to do with the outdoors. So as high school was ending, I was seeing what options were out there. Wasn't sure if I wanted to do engineering. And then forestry seemed kind of interesting because it got you outside and you get to manage trees and forests and be in nature. But then I heard about this program at the University of Brunswick called forest engineering. So it's a blend of forestry and engineering. And I thought, oh, wow, that actually sounds like the ideal thing for me. So I went to University of Brunswick in Fredericton for about 5 years. It was an amazing experience. And as I went through my courses, I actually did prefer the technical engineering side more so than the forestry. And then when I graduated, unfortunately, the forestry industry in Canada was a bit of a slump, so there weren't a lot of jobs available. But the good thing about that was that I had the opportunity to travel a bit. So I went down to Ecuador in South America, and it's supposed to be a 2-week trip, and it ended up being about 2 years. And while down there, I saw a real need for, just providing not just clean drinking water for people, but also sanitation and just infrastructure that you tend to take advantage of in North America because we just take it for granted that the water coming out of the tap is clean and I can have a hot shower every morning and not think about it. So it got me thinking I'd like to be able to have a career that would be in that realm. So when I got back to Canada, I did find a job in a large engineering corporation, and that was a good experience to get my feet wet in the industry. And then I heard about this company called Enviro-Stewards. I know that the founder, Bruce Taylor, had started the company because he liked doing volunteer work internationally, but also did the engineering consulting work. So when a friend of mine told me about this, I thought, well, that sounds really intriguing. So I called Bruce, and this is now, about 18 years ago, so quite a while. Called him up, and so we had me in for an interview, and then it just so happened that someone was leaving the company at the time, so the timing worked out for me to join them. I've been here ever since, so a lot of the work has been on-the-job training. Our type of approach, which I'm sure we'll get into later, is a bit unique. So we don't necessarily have to have a specific background to work in Enviro-Stewards, but it helps to have a engineering or science background and have a interest in solving problems and looking at things from different angles. So that's sort of the long story of how I ended up at Enviro-Stewards, and here I am today, 18 years later. What
would you say, kind of excites you the most about, if you could pick something out of like the 18 years that you've been with the company now, is there something that really still kind of excites you getting up each day of being a part of the company?
Yeah, like a lot of it has to do with the impact of our work, and a lot of it has to do with just the work culture. I really enjoy the people I work with. The mission vision of the company is pretty amazing. So our mission is to build sustainable businesses and improve lives in extraordinary ways. And we do that through consulting, but also through safe water projects internationally. So I think those two aspects make it a really unique place to work. And I think also intriguing is our approach to solving problems. So, typically in engineering, if there's a wastewater issue or something needs to be addressed, oftentimes it's a band-aid solution. So let's just build a treatment system or an air treatment system and sort of destroy this thing before it gets to the environment. And Enviro-Stewards' approach has always been a prevention approach. So it used to be known as pollution prevention was what we would describe ourselves as doing. So addressing problems at the source instead of at the end of pipe. Now, in a wastewater example, we worked with a winery in Oliver, BC, and they needed to build a wastewater treatment system. And so we thought, we could help you do that, but let us look in your factory first and see if we can find ways to reduce what's going to the sewer before we talk about the design and flows and whatnot to scale it and size it. And so they agreed to that. So we went in and cut their water and organics going to the sewer by, I think, about a third or so.
Wow.
And we went twice just doing this type of study, like figuring out, how is the wine getting to the drains and getting to the treatment system. And another advantage of that approach is that what's going down the drain and being destroyed in the treatment system is actually product or ingredients you've purchased already. So why destroy them when you paid for them? Why not put them in a bottle and sell it? So it's one of the advantages of preventing things from happening first instead of just dealing with what's coming out into the pipe. So in their case, we did build a treatment system, but it was about, I think, 50% of the capital cost that it would have been if we designed for the peak flow before we did our water conservation and organics conservation assessment. So that sort of pollution prevention approach was quite unique. And at the beginning, it was a bit challenging to help educate people on that approach, because usually they had a presenting problem and they just wanted a quick solution to fix it. Whereas we're saying, well, let's look in your factory first, take it to your facility, set up some meters, do some logging, and figuring out what's going on. And that's a bit more of a risk for clients because they don't know what you're going to find. We typically always do find savings at the end of the day.
As soon as you open up a wall kind of situation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Once you start looking at data, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Wonder what's causing that. And then you start looking at, root causes of what we call a root cause approach. So instead of just Band-Aids, what's the root cause of this, energy consumption that's really high compared to other processes? And how can we practically and affordably reduce it? And so it saves the facility money, but it also reduces environmental footprint. And so I would say, but nowadays, like in 2025, people really see the value of this approach now because just of people's concerns about the climate and, reducing environmental footprints, and a lot of pressure now from the public and government and society on companies to quote unquote be greener or more sustainable. Right. Our type of approach fits hand in glove with that because we're looking at reducing first. And so when you reduce your energy use, your natural gas use, you're reducing your greenhouse gas emissions as well. So our approach is sort of now finally being recognized as a great way to approach engineering problems, especially when it comes to long-term sustainability.
What was it that was kind of like the chicken or the egg in that whole kind of equation? Like, it sounds like energy conservation, but also like you're talking a lot about like almost like water, like wastewater or pollution prevention kind of like situations. Do you feel that it was like kind of the economic aspect of things that kind of drove the change? Do you think it was the sustainability kind of angle that companies have now started to become more just engaged with? Which one do you think has ultimately helped move people from a reactive kind of like end of the pipe situation to a more preventative kind of approach like what Enviro-Stewards offers?
Yeah, I think some of it is what I alluded to before, just societal pressure. Customers are demanding that companies disclose what they're doing for the environment, and reducing their environmental footprint is a great way to promote their initiatives. Originally, way back in the day, it was mostly economic. So we could find practical and affordable solutions that would reduce utility consumption. And we always try to provide a business case whenever possible for what we recommend, so they can actually see there is a business case for doing something. So, hey, if you implement these 3 opportunities, each one has a payback of less than 2 years. Here's the projected savings, not only your dollar savings, but also reduction in environmental footprints and just consumption in general. And so for companies who did that earlier on, it also helps them become more competitive because they can make their product for less money because they've reduced their bottom line costs that go to utility savings or expenses. So then they're that slight bit more competitive than their competitor, and they're able to have market longevity because of that. And some were just pressure. So there are some environmental regulations that are either provincial or federal that companies must adhere to. So sometimes we get calls and say, we have to solve this problem, whatever it costs monetarily, we have to solve this problem because we're under pressure from the city to make a change. We can't put this down the sewer or whatever the problem is. In those cases, yeah, we go solve the problem, but we try to do it again with a way that could save them money in the long run by reducing first instead of just, installing treatment right away. But now that people see the advantages of, not just the positive PR that comes from being able to promote your sustainability initiatives, people see how that's also tied to economic savings as well. So usually it's not one or the other. Some nowadays are more environmentally driven. Like, as you know, a lot of people or a lot of companies have set greenhouse gas reduction targets. Like by 2030, they want to reduce by X amount to become carbon neutral. And, they make those claims, but then they realize, oh, we got to get there somehow. So again, our type of work, now we got to get there. So our type of work really can help them achieve those goals because we can project what their savings will be and if they'd be on target or not for achieving them within their timeline and what adjustments they need to make to be able to hit those targets. So it's been a confluence of a lot of things, I think, just from society in general, but also companies recognizing that a preventative approach or reduction first makes a lot more sense than just end of pipe or just putting up solar panels or wind turbines, which are great technologies, but we always say don't waste your energy more efficiently with those types of alternative energy sources. Reduce first and then look at energy like from wind turbines or solar. So I can maybe talk about Arla. I'm more familiar with that one. So they participated in York region, had a water conservation program where they would provide essentially free water audit to industrial, commercial, and institutional facilities within York region. And we were the consultant who did those assessments. So in Arla's case, we did a water conservation study, but it did include a wastewater component. Because sometimes for food manufacturers, they're a little bit reluctant to do water conservation because the effluent or sewage they're putting out of their facility and going to the municipal wastewater treatment systems, there are certain parameters they have to meet for what they're putting down the sewer. So one of the common ones is BOD, or biochemical oxygen demand, or total suspended solids is another one. But each city will have a sewer use bylaw that says the maximum threshold of these particular elements that they need to stay within. And if they go over them, they get charged, and they would have to enter what's called an overstrength agreement to be able to put out more, stronger effluent concentrations. And it costs money each year to be able to do that. And if they don't enter a surcharge agreement and they keep going over the limit, then there are more serious consequences. So for that reason, some food and beverage companies are understandably reluctant to reduce water because, if you reduce your volume of water, your concentrations go up. So that's usually the top three reasons for not participating in a water conservation program. But we're able to demonstrate that even if you do have higher concentrations after implementing the water conservation opportunities, you actually still have a net savings overall because of the reduced water consumption. So the money you save in water conservation far exceeds the incremental increase to your surcharge amount. So, for example, in Arla's case, we're able to do water conservation. So we set up a bunch of flow meters, measure where water is going, come up with a roster of opportunities that, if you did this is the water reduction you could expect. This is the estimated capital cost and payback. And then along with that, and here's a wastewater study, like here's some ideas for reducing your wastewater loading before it gets to going down the drain, and give ideas to be able to do that in plant. And then even if your concentrations remain the same, demonstrating that the water savings achieved through water conservation would outweigh whatever it is you'd have to pay in an increased surcharge. So overall, I think they saved about a third of their water consumption, over $140,000 per year, I think.
Wow.
Plus they had additional operational savings. And then they also got an incentive from York region for the things that they implemented and the water saved. So we went back a short while later after they implemented some of these ideas and remeasured and then calculated what the savings were. And then they got a buyback incentive from the region for that as well. So there's a case study on our website. You can see a photo of the Arla staff with a big check from York region. So that's an example where we're able to combine, our wastewater expertise with our water conservation expertise and provide a really great project with Arla and York Region.
Was there any of those lessons that as you went through the process with Arla that you think that were little tangible, almost like nuggets of encouragement that other food processors, other manufacturers could kind of take from today that would help them kickstart their own journey?
Yeah, like if the reluctance is because of the concentrations, then someone like us could help them calculate what the effect would be. Usually the municipalities have a formula that's disclosed about how they calculate the surcharge amount, and so it's just a mathematical exercise to figure out what they would pay if the concentrations went up by X amount, and then show them but if you saved your water by X amount, this is actually the break-even point, and above that you're actually going to save money overall, even if your concentrations do go up by that amount. So there are things you can do just to calculate and project what the savings could be. Sometimes that gets people over that sort of hump of not moving forward with water conservation. And also just having case studies like Arla, who demonstrated, this is what we saved. It was a great experience and it was well worth doing in the end. So I think the more they can see from their peers, especially if they're in the same field and maybe competitors, while they're doing it, I think we should do it too. And we want to get those types of savings because, like I say, every dollar you save on your bottom line is a huge benefit to the company.
Water conservation and water treatment and all this kind of stuff are kind of like one of the aspects of what Enviro-Stewards does. But how would you say that the work in water conservation kind of aligns to the overall company, like as a whole?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about water and wastewater, and those are areas that we do cover. But we use this approach for anything that we do. So we're also looking at electrical consumption, thermal energy consumption, whether it's natural gas or propane or whatever your fuel source is. Waste, like food loss and waste, is a huge issue globally. A significant amount of food is wasted just in North America alone. That's billions of dollars. And some of that happens in the manufacturing facilities. So again, we can help them assess where they're losing the waste, how much it's going to cost them, and potential ideas to reduce the food loss and waste. So again, we've worked on some case studies with some organizations that are available online. So whatever it is, you have electricity, water, natural gas, food, or any other type of waste, our approach is the same. You want to measure what's happening to get your baseline. Here's where we are now. And then once you have that information, you want to prioritize what to tackle first. So you don't want to look at things that are going to have a really small impact, say on your electrical consumption. You're going to go for the top three. What are the top three processes consuming most of our electricity that could be changed and have a significant savings? Or whether it's water or whatever it is you're looking at, try to focus on the top things and then address those first, and then go through the approach I mentioned like we did for Arla. You just do an assessment, install meters, collect data, further data, and then start finding opportunities to reduce those, whatever it is you're looking at, and then how much it's going to cost, what could the savings be. And then another important part of how we do it is we really like to work with the client to make sure they're on board with what we find. So usually at the beginning of a project, we'll have a kickoff meeting with quality control people, lead hands, operators, even people from finance or C-suite if possible, to tell them what we're going to do, why we're there, what our approach is. Because if we're going to come up with ideas that we would like them to implement that is going to save money and resources in the end, if everybody's in that room at the beginning, they become stakeholders in the entire project. And so it's much more likely they're going to want to implement things because they're part of the decision-making process all along. So once we have our roster of opportunities, we meet with that team again and sort of go through what we found and troubleshoot them. Does this opportunity seem to make sense? And if there's something they want to tweak, yeah, sure, we can do that. And so once you finish that meeting, you have a bunch of ideas that everybody agrees are practical to do. Then you can do a deeper dive on, well, how much is it actually going to cost, and do a bit more of a detailed costing and savings projections. And then, you move into implementation phase. And along with that, again, is metering. So making sure that they're getting the savings that or expected? And if not, what do we need to change to make sure that those savings are occurring?
What would you say is on the horizon for you? Like if we're looking ahead to what 2025 up to even 2030, obviously 2030 is that kind of like year that so many companies are heading towards. How do you see Enviro-Stewards evolving to help those companies hit their 2030 goals?
Yeah, well, we're working with several right now, many of them multi-facilities in the US and Canada, to help them achieve those goals. So we did just as I had described, and we're working through implementation with many of them. And we also developed a system called Stewie, which is an energy management information system, so EMIS.
Okay.
And Stewie stands for System to Track Energy, Water, and Waste Improvements. And so essentially it centralizes all the metering data we're collecting into an online dashboard. And their staff at the facilities can log in, see minute by minute data of what's happening in their facility. With that data, then we're able to project, what if these savings continue, when will they achieve their target, and are they on track or not to achieve that target? Say, like in your example, by 2030, having that data that's live, that's current, can help us make real-time decisions with the client as whether they're on track or not. And if they're off track, again, okay, is there something consuming more energy than we had anticipated? And are there other opportunities that we should explore to make sure that you hit that target? Or are there things that we can tweak, in general to make it, to accelerate getting towards their targets? But it's a way to centralize all the data and for people to be able to better, like EMIS, it's managing their energy, it's giving them data to be able to do that. So that's one of the exciting things that we rolled out to several clients, and we'll roll out more and more over the years, because it's a great way to centralize all that information. And
sounds like,
whatever data they want is at their fingertips. If they need it for corporate sustainability report, Stewie can export figures and tables for that. If they need to demonstrate it to customers or to peers within their own organization, again, they can go into Stewie, see whatever data they need to see. And then on our end, we also provide engineering support, so they're not just left alone to look at the data and figure it out on their own, but they have a whole team of technical people at Enviro-Stewards who are there to support them and figure out with them and troubleshoot, why aren't we getting these savings and this opportunity based on what we had projected, and then go into the plant, see what's happening on the floor, and that's why, and tweaking the system. Maybe something was installed incorrectly, or just needed a small adjustment on a valve that no one noticed, and then you can get back on track. So important thing for us is that it's not just sort of static software people log into, but there's a team behind it that can be relied on, like a human, to be able to intervene when necessary. So we try to partner with our clients to make sure through implementation, tracking the savings is sort of a team thing where we are here in the background with you to support you when you're not just handing you over to some system to worry on your own. And so I think that's one of the dynamics that's important to us with rolling out a software platform like this.
How do you see the combination of like the assessment, which you have used for years, and Stewie kind of working hand in hand to help a company off the ground for maybe the first time that they're really trying to sort out some consumption usage issues?
Yeah, well, companies come to us at different stages in their journey towards sustainability, or whatever that goal could be. It could be carbon neutral. It could be just to reduce energy by X%. Some are already well versed in their baselines. They already know what their plant's doing. They have sub-metering in place already. They can present it, here's our baselines. We know where we are. We want to get here. We can help them get there. Some come, we don't even know where we are. Like we want to save money. We know we're using a lot of water or electricity. We don't know how to reduce it. And so that's when we sort of start, from a foundation of building that baseline with them. So wherever their starting point is, we can work with them, but then it's helping figure out the most efficient and cost-effective way to get to whatever goal they have is where sort of the common denominator with everybody. Like, we have these targets we need to get to, help us get there. Whatever those targets are, we can come in and help them. And along the way, so moving from just doing assessments and, here's your report of opportunities and getting into helping them actually implement this thing, like shovels in the ground, so they can actually realize the savings. They're not just numbers in a report on a shelf, but they're actually in place, saving money, and then tracking those savings. A really important step for us and for the companies as well to be able to actually hit those targets. So as an example, we were metering water consumption at a facility and noticed that there's a significant amount of background consumption when there was no production. So over the weekend, they had a really high water consumption. I think it was like 40 or 60 liters per minute of just baseline water use. And so we noticed this through the data, and our team went in on a Saturday when there wasn't any production, and essentially they walked around the facility with a portable flow meter and figured out where the various water losses were. And I think there were about half a dozen areas they discovered that were losing water, whether it was just a float that was stuck, we're flowing water constantly, valve that wasn't working. Fairly simple repairs, nothing too complex. And I think by 4 p.m. that day, the baseline was down to like 0 liters per minute. So that's a really great example of having access to that type of detailed information that's live data. When you look at your monthly bill, it can hide a lot of things that you don't see unless you look at granular minute by minute consumption. So there's several instances of that where we notice there's a really high consumption, facility doesn't really know what's going on. We can go in, work with them, do an additional study and figure out what the root causes of that extra consumption is, and then implement things to eliminate or at least reduce it as much as possible.
And one of the things that stood out to me as you kind of talked today, Lloyd, and it sounds much more almost like a partnership that you engage with your clients than just like almost like a service provider. You've talked about like the team that's available to them. You've talked about, getting buy-in and things like that. Would you say that that's one of kind of like the big things that's different about Enviro-Stewards? Because I can't believe you're the only sustainable engineering firm out there. But would you say, is that one of the big things that separates Enviro-Stewards from others in the marketplace?
I would say so. And since our founding, 25 years ago today, we're celebrating 25 years in 2025, which is pretty amazing. But ever since our founding, it's always been a type of a partnership that we want with the clients. Because as I was describing previously, the type of work we do does require a lot more upfront education and explaining what exactly it is we'll do when we come into your facility. Because of that, we need to be able to work closely with our clients. So the type of staff we hire needs to be able to have those, relational abilities and how to talk to people, how to be agents of change within facilities. And when you want things done, you just don't want a consultant to come in and hand a report and say, do these 5 things. Because it often doesn't work and they don't feel part of the project and there's a bit of a disconnect. So like I say, our approach has always been, here's what we found. And we're going to bring you along from the beginning in how we found these things. We're going to show you the data we used to come to these conclusions, and we want your opinion. Does it make sense for you or not to do these 5, 10 things? And if not, how can we improve them or change them that would maybe better suit what you're looking for? And then working together to get them implemented. So again, industry especially is extremely busy. Companies that are manufacturers are trying to get product out the door. When a line goes down, all attention is focused on that line. When a lead hand is absent, you got to scramble to fill that role. And so oftentimes with the best intentions, they want to do these things that will save money and get them towards sustainability goals, but just reality hits and people become busy and just overwhelmed. And these other things that are important but more long-term are the ones that tend to get put to the side temporarily, always thinking, we'll get back to that next week or next week. So again, that's what we've noticed. And so, and so we can come in and help make sure that doesn't happen. So we call ourselves like quarterbacks. So we can help quarterback a team meeting to keep moving these projects forward. We can work with your vendors or contractors to get them scheduled to come in to look at the equipment and size the new one, or whatever it is, whatever assistance we can provide. Or do you want monthly meetings? We can sit down with the team each month, go through the action plan, the opportunities, figure out what's the next step, who's responsible, and just provide that background momentum to keep things moving forward. And so I think that's also things that companies have appreciated, because people are just so busy, and if we can be there to help in the background, it's all the more beneficial to both of us to have that working relationship, because the more you get to know a client, the more you understand their processes and how they operate, what their goals are, what their needs are. And it's just much easier relationship later on when other issues come up, to know each other well and know the best approach to solve whatever it is that comes up in the future.